Hello and welcome to another episode of Addicted to Business. Today is a huge honour for me to introduce Mr. Mark Schaefer to the show. Hi Mark, how you doing?
Hey, I couldn't be better. Believe it or not, in 2020, I'm doing great.
Everything's going on. And of course, no episode of Addicted to Business would be complete without my good friend and co-host, Mr. Stokely Howard.
Thank you for the kind intro, Nathan. And Mark, I must say I'm honoured to have you on the show. It's a joy. Thank you.
So for those that don't know Mark, an internationally acclaimed speaker, author and college educator, he's recognised globally as a top social media expert, and it's going to be a great show today. But before we dive into any of that, we've got 45 minutes. First of all, I want to know, Mark, how did it all start for you? Where did it begin, right from college all the way up until where you are now?
Well, I think for me, it was kind of unexpected, but when I was in college, I was a journalism major. I thought it was, and that really ended up being a great foundation to be in sort of the content economy that we're in today. I didn't know it at the time, of course. And then in my junior year, I took my first marketing class. And, I got addicted to business. I opened up this book, Principles of Marketing. I still have it on my desk, from Dr. Philip Kotler. And he said, marketing is a combination of psychology, anthropology, and sociology. I thought that is the coolest thing in the world. Who wouldn't want to major in that? I started out in corporate communications for a Fortune 100 company, eventually got my MBA, I got to study under Peter Drucker, and then got into marketing, and I've done it just about everything you can dream of in terms of marketing, product development and pricing and global product launches. And then about 12 years ago, I started my own company. I started consulting. That's really my sweet spot, marketing strategy. And I started a blog. And 12 years ago, social media was just becoming mainstream. And I knew to teach, to consult, I need to immerse myself in this. It really is a whim. I started a blog, and the darn thing took off. And I think what happened was I was about the only blogger at the time that had any real business experience. Those early days, you guys were probably in junior high or something, right? So, but the early days of blogging, that there wasn't a lot of real business experience. It was all sort of pie in the sky, and I looked at what was going on, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is just so wrong. This isn't how business works. So I kind of started telling the truth and connecting the dots between social media and business. That took off, and that led to book deals. I started writing books, and then the books led to public speaking. And so here I am today. And my income is sort of balanced between a lot of different things, but mostly consulting and speaking.
Wow. You summed up your career quite concise there, but I'm sure it's been more of a roller coaster than that, Mark.
Oh, I know. I just wanted to get on to something more interesting.
I love that. I want to talk to you a little bit about your book, The Tale of Twitter, from 2014, I believe. It is, correct me if I'm wrong, but it is the best-selling book on Twitter in the world. Tell us more about the power of Twitter, as I, for one, certainly don't use it to its full potential, I don't think. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Oh, actually, that book was actually updated in 2018. So there is
okay.
a new
Right,
edition.
Yeah.
And when I started out with Twitter, I hated it. I thought it was the dumbest thing in the world. The first tweet I ever received was, "It's 4 a.m." confirming this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. I started to really, get into it, and I had this epiphany. I had this life-changing moment, really, in terms of my view of social media. Back then, we had a pandemic going on called the swine flu, and the pork industry is saying, "Don't call it the swine flu, call it something else, because we want people to keep eating pork." So on Twitter, there were these people creating all these funny new names for the swine flu, like the apocalypse and anthrax. And I was laughing so hard, I had tears coming down my face. And then I realized, remember, this is like 10 or 11 years ago. I was watching a real-time global brainstorming session. And oh my gosh, it was a breathtaking moment. Just think about that. It could have never happened in the history of the human race. But how could we bring that power together for business and for solving problems and for, just solving, connecting people on a global basis? And so I just had a new appreciation for the power of Twitter. And I think if you look at the numbers, and you look at the popularity of Twitter, if you sort of looked at it anew, you think, wow, that is an incredible social media platform. And the people who use Twitter, they love it. They're on it all the time. It's where news breaks. They're addicted to it. Twitter chats. I'm not a big fan of Twitter chat because it takes a lot of work to really be a guest, let's say, on a Twitter chat. But I mean, the people that gather together every week around the world on Twitter chats. So it's a powerful way to connect. It's a powerful way to learn. So I think for the hundreds of millions of people who love Twitter around the world, they don't need any explanation. They know the power of Twitter. And if you're in business or in marketing and haven't really considered Twitter in a while, I'd encourage you to look into it.
Yeah, you're totally right. There's more to it than meets the eye, right? There's more to it than the annoying people that take the mickey out of you all the time.
Mark, from my point of view, I'm interested to know about another one of your recent publications, which focus on the human side of a company and winning. And with technology taking over our lives, and with this certainly being accelerated during this global pandemic, what I want to know is how can businesses really harness that human side of business? Because with Twitter, with social media, with Snapchat, TikTok, the list goes on, we seem to have lost that kind of human interaction.
Well, yeah, you're referring to my latest book is called Marketing Rebellion, the most human company needs. And the main thesis of the book, and I actually think this book is like coming true before our eyes during this pandemic. It came out a year ago, but sort of everything I predicted would happen in the book is coming true right now. And what's happened is that there's been an incredible decline in the effectiveness of marketing for many companies. And there's been an incredible decline in loyalty. 87% of our customers are shop around customers. And this is an incredible change just over the last 20 years. And this isn't my view of the world. I mean, this is research from Deloitte and Accenture and McKinsey. And McKinsey in their research made an important observation. They said the reason that marketing is failing, loyalty is decline, and the customer journey is a tangled mess, because we've lost sight of the fact that marketing is about emotion. Great marketing, great branding is about building an emotional connection between what you do and your audience. And marketers have become obsessed with technology and automation and algorithms, and spamming, lead nurturing, which is a very friendly way of saying we're going to keep bothering you until you block us. Robocalls. Whoever invented that and thought that was marketing. And technology isn't bad. It's just technology. When we use technology to interrupt people, intercept people, abuse people, take advantage of their privacy, waste their time, then there's going to be a rebellion. The consumers are going to fight back and say, stop it. And here's one of the things I show in my book is that when the consumers rebel, they always win. Always in history. We have 100 years of evidence of this. So we need to get ahead of the curve. And we need to have a more human-centered approach to marketing. And that means using technology in a way that doesn't create barriers between us and our customers. It means using technology like we're doing right now. we're seeing our faces, we're hearing our voices. Right now, you're hearing my passion on this subject. The great use of technology to build this human connection. So that's really the trick. How do we use technology to take down those barriers and renew the human connection that all of us want with our favorite companies and brands?
And that leads me perfectly onto my next question. I think the way that these brands and these businesses can get across the human side is via podcasts. You're getting to really hear what it is that they're thinking straight from their mouth, not through some marketing campaign or some word splurge on a website. You're getting to really hear the owners of these businesses talk. So it's only right that we reference your wonderful podcast, The Marketing Companion, ranked as one of the top 10 marketing podcasts on iTunes, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. So like I said, podcasts are becoming more and more popular. What tips can you give for anyone listening right now who wants to start a podcast but don't know how?
Yeah. One of my favorite observations is that marketers flock to whatever is popular until they ruin it. And I saw a statistic that 105% of all marketers now have a podcast in America. I don't know if it's the same for you in the
It's certainly getting that way, isn't it?
It's getting that way. And the entry barriers have become so low. And that's, I think, an important point as to why podcasts have become so popular and why they've been embraced by companies, by marketers. The evolution of content on the web, the first thing was blogging, creating video, creating podcasts. There was still significant technological hurdles to create a video. You needed equipment. You needed editing equipment. And it was the same with podcasts. But then we got into videos where now you can make amazing videos just on your smartphone. We now have, we don't really have bandwidth, Wi-Fi issues almost anywhere we go. So it's like, having a smartphone is like carrying a little radio station in your pocket. So that's really why podcasting has grown double-digit popularity. To start today, and certainly I would not, I was joking earlier starting a podcast, but I certainly would encourage people to try it if that's your heart, if you think that it's going to be fun. And I think that's a key idea, because if it's not fun and you don't enjoy it, quit, and you can't quit, right? You got to give yourself, I'm thinking 18 months of regular content, give yourself a chance, see if it's going to work or not.
Yeah.
The best advice, I think, comes from a dear friend of mine, Tom Webster, who's the vice president of research, Edison Research. And he specializes in the evaluation of podcasts. He knows every trend, every statistic. And he said, to have a successful show, it really has to be a show. If you think about what do you watch on television? What do you watch on YouTube? What sort of blogs do you read? There's got to be some sort of entertainment value to it. There just has to be. The world is so competitive, and that's really what Tom is saying here, that you've got to find some way to not just deliver information, but deliver it in a way that's entertaining. And that's hard, that's a lot of work, but it does take a lot of work to stand out today.
Love that. Thank you for so much value.
So, Mark, with your research and knowledge into the world of social media, I'm really interested for us to understand and the audience to understand where we think social is heading. It was nice that you said you've made a few predictions, and sure enough, those things are happening with your recent book. But actually, in terms of social, it seems to be changing so quickly. What do we think the future of social looks like?
Nathan, the thing that I'm kind of known for in my world is that I can usually see how things come together. I can look at all the trends, and I can kind of see how things come together. And as you very correctly say, there's so much changing right now. I really don't know where social media is headed, and I'm uncomfortable saying that. But I think there's some big wild cards out there, and I think one of the wild cards is regulations and government interactions. And we're not going to see anything happen really until after the American election. But the monopolistic behaviors of the big tech companies, the arrogant approach to privacy and monetization, really has united politicians from both parties in America to say something's got to be done. So I think that is, that is a huge wild card. I think you just got to look at what the heck is happening with TikTok and the ownership of TikTok right now. There's just profound implications for how that whole situation is being handled. And you think about the technical capability of China and the fact that there's more people in China than the UK and America put together. And it just stands to reason that a lot of amazing apps are going to be coming out of China.
Yeah.
So that's another wild card. I think the impact of AI is going to be a wild card. I think the impact of people moving from public channels like Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, where everybody can kind of see what you're doing, to private channels like WeChat or Snapchat or Facebook Messenger is going to have a profound impact on marketing and information connecting customers. I think when you see what's happening with Apple and they're taking a lead in privacy, it's going to really corrupt a lot of the advertising programs that we have. How's that going to sort out? I think that's going to be something. Advertisers have been very resourceful in kind of getting around some of those things. We're coming up against some privacy hurdles, and rightly so, because it's in response to that consumer rebellion that we just can't really predict what's going to happen with that right now. So there's so many mega trends coming together right now that it's really difficult to know what's going to happen. I think people are tired of the toxicity, which is why they're going behind firewalls like Snapchat and Messenger and going into private rooms. I think that's really where the future is going to be, not public social media, but in these little chat rooms and clubs and organizations that are behind firewalls. But past that, it's really hard to see the future right now, because there's so much change, so much change that's going to happen in the next 12 to 18 months.
And does that change mean it's exciting to be in social or worrying to be in social right now?
For me, I think it's amazingly exciting. So if you look, if you we're in a difficult and sad time, and I don't want to dismiss that at all. And the economic strife that people are suffering with, political strife, civil unrest, the health crisis with the pandemic. I mean, all that pales to comparison, all the changes going on in social media. But with all this change that's happening from all those things I just mentioned, there's no more exhilarating time to be in business, because so many trends are changing. So many behaviors that are occurring during the pandemic are going to become consumer habits. We're already seeing that. So from the standpoint of a marketer and an academic, this is absolutely fascinating. There's never been a more energizing and exciting time to watch how all this is going to end up and try to, stay ahead of it. It's a very interesting time.
I completely agree with you. Mark, I can see you have carried out talks and presentations across the globe. For those younger members of our audience looking to get started on their entrepreneurial journey, and we've all been there, what pearls of wisdom, I guess, can you share with them to help them get started? And I'm sure there's many that you can give.
Well, one thing I've been thinking a lot about recently, in fact, I just talked about it on my last podcast episode, is the difference between initiative and hustle.
Mhm.
And there was an article that came out recently about, it was very critical of Gary Vaynerchuk. He really hasn't changed his message or changed his tone during the pandemic. And this article was very critical of this, that he's still saying, you're having hard times and you're just a big baby and you need to stop making excuses and you need to get with it. And I mean, obviously that comes across as rather tone deaf, but it got me thinking about what's really missing here. And I think back at my own career, I faced significant disadvantages in my life and in my career. I had some advantages, but I had some disadvantages too. And I thought about every time I faced these disadvantages, I just had this grit and I had this resourcefulness and I had this creativity to find a way around it.
Yeah.
And I would just kind of force myself into situations that led to opportunities. And that's initiative. The hustle culture is really built on work and quantities of work and doubling down on work and just thinking that you can out hustle and outwork the other people. But I really think there's a lot more that a lot more credit really has to be placed on initiative, which is resourcefulness and grit and commitment rather than just, hustle. And I don't mean to oversimplify Gary's message, but I think that's sort of the way a lot of his followers internalize it. And I've talked to a lot of his followers who are having problems because they're working and working and working and they're not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
And they don't really have a vision. They don't really have a strategy. They don't have a plan. They don't know what their point of differentiation is. They don't have a monetization plan. And so that would be my main view, my main tip for an entrepreneur today.
Mark, I mean, that takes us on nicely. For me, we see certainly over here in the UK, and I guess the same in the US, so many businesses are adopting different social platforms and arguably sometimes too many, and they're getting it horribly wrong. And for me, it's like whether it be trying to manage too many accounts, whether it be not understanding the audience and just speaking as if they're speaking to themselves. Where do you see the common pitfalls? And for our listeners today, how can they make sure they get social right?
Well, that's a great question, Nathan. And I think that really comes back to some of the main ideas that we were starting to talk about in terms of the Marketing Rebellion book, the most human company thing. Okay. Now, my view is small companies, entrepreneurs have a huge advantage in this era because you know your customers. You are the brand. As a small business owner, people know you. They can connect with you.
Yeah.
They can hear you. They know what you stand for. That is really hard to translate for a major corporation. And that's the pitfall we're seeing primarily on social media today. We're in this pandemic. We have all this civil unrest. And all these big companies that are just sticking to a script that's been dictated by an advertising agency are becoming laughing stocks, right? I saw this tweet that said, I'm really tired of seeing things like from Toyota, oh, we're with you, but here, we still want you to buy this car. And so they're just locked into this script that really isn't human-centered. It's me-centered. It's sales-centered. And today, everyone we know is suffering in some way. Everyone we know is lost, a lifestyle or the ability to visit your parents or go to a pub or go see your favorite musical act or work at home without, homeschooling your kids at the same time. everyone is experiencing some chaos and loss and grief. And the companies that succeed are the ones that are going to roll up their sleeves and do something, and not just say things on social media, but do things on social media, in their community, with their customers. One of my friends said, I think said very wisely, we need to pair up half of our marketing budget and use that money just to help people right now, because that's how we need to show up. That's what's going to create an emotional connection to our brand to really help people, instead of saying we're with you.
And Mark, have you seen many businesses getting it right during the pandemic? Have you seen many large organizations pivot and change the message, and suddenly you're like, wow, they've absolutely nailed it?
Honestly, not that many. I mean, not that many. And I don't know if you fellas saw this YouTube video. There's a YouTube video. It was called something like "Every pandemic ad is the same."
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah,
Right?
the emotional one.
Same music.
Yeah, the piano.
It's the same, the same piano music. It's the same narrator. It's the same words. And
Yeah.
it's just company, 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 company. And it's ridiculous. It's so I think many companies are so far behind. The companies that are getting it are the small companies. I'll give you, an example. There was, I had the coronavirus, right? My wife had the virus. We were sick for a period of almost 2 months, and we were quarantined in our homes. We couldn't leave. We couldn't get food. There was a local rancher, fellow that raises cattle, and he sent us an email. He said, "We know you can't visit restaurants right now. We'll bring our steaks to you." Right? Now, he's pivoting from, if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? The base level needs are, do I have shelter? Do I have clean air to breathe? Am I going to be, catch a disease? Do I have enough food? We couldn't get food. And if you went to the stores, a lot of the store shelves were empty. There's a guy saying serves high-end restaurants. He's a B2B company saying, "I will bring my food to your door." That's amazing, right? This is a person who's become legendary because he's pivoted, all right? He rolled up his sleeves. He said, "We're going to figure out a new way to do this." And that's what the world needed in that moment. In many cases, we still need that. And so it's really hard for big companies to do something meaningful, right? But, I've been asked to consult to a lot of big companies on this topic. I think they're going to try. So I'm hopeful that we'll see some things in the next couple of weeks and months.
Hopeful. I want to talk to you a little bit about someone who you spent a little of your time studying under. I'm one of the greatest management consultants of all time, and his name is Mr. Peter Drucker. Can you tell me a little bit more about Peter and a little bit about your time studying under him?
Well, yes. First of all, if you're not familiar with Peter Drucker, I mean, I think most people have at least heard of him because even though I think he died maybe 10, 12 years ago, quotes from his books still show up in business articles and social media streams really every day.
Yeah.
And he was literally the wisest, smartest man I've ever known, and also a very kind, generous man. When I got to study under him, I was in my MBA program. I studied under him for 3 years, and he would just come in on a Saturday morning, typically sit at the edge of a desk with a box of donuts and a carafe of coffee and talk about one of his books for 3 hours, really. And, I think the biggest lesson I learned from him is humility. Is that as a leader in a business, your job is not to have all the right answers, to ask the right questions. is to know enough to lead and get them to come up with the answers, but you've got to know enough to ask the key question. It's the same thing for me in consulting. I can't go in, I can't, I'm working with, big tech companies and pharma companies and CPG companies. I can't be an expert in all these things. That would be so arrogant for me to come in and start telling people what to do. My role is to ask the right questions. You know what? We've never thought of it that way before. We need to look into that. When they look into it, they're going to be able to find answers themselves. So that was a huge lesson that came from Peter Drucker. That was pounded into my head almost every hour. He would get so angry when people, he taught by the case study method. So we would study these long, complex business problems, and there'd be like these vice presidents in his class, and they'd have all the answers. And he would get mad. He said, what makes you think you're so arrogant that these people who have worked at this company for 30 years, they can't figure it out and you can by reading it? And so he would emphasize, our goal is to find the right questions, not the right answers. And that has served me very well in my career.
That is a perfect takeaway. And for anyone listening, I think that's a lovely note to end on. Mark, final thing from me, for those listening today that have thought, actually, I really buy into what Mark's saying and I'd love to find out more about him. How do we suggest people do that? Go to the website, check you out on social media, etc.? Yeah,
it's super easy. You don't have to remember how to spell Schaefer. You just have to remember businesses grow. Businessesgrow.com is my website. You can find my blog. You can find the podcast we mentioned, the Marketing Companion. You can find all my books and all my social media connections. And I'd love to hear from your fans.
Massive
thank you so much.
To those that are listening, I hope you've enjoyed it. And we look forward to seeing you on the next show. Thanks again.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.